Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Sarah Martinez sat alone, a clipboard in her lap, and her hair tied back beneath the brim of a borrowed ball cap. She wasn't too supposed to be here. Not in this part of the range. Not this close to the action, and definitely not among the men in khaki shirts and sun-scarred arms. But when the radio crackled earlier, requesting more hands to reset the long-range targets, she was the first to move. They didn't. To expect her to stay. No one ever did. At 23, she blended into the background easily enough. Part-time range worker, nursing student, and daughter of a retired Marine gunnery sergeant who still flinched when he heard fireworks in July. She changed targets, swept brass, and kept her head down. That was the deal. Stay invisible. Stay useful, Dawn. To draw attention. But then Rodriguez. Through the rifle, it wasn't too subtle. The weapon clattered to the gravel in a flash of steel and frustration. "This thing is off," he barked, loud enough for the whole firing line to hear. "I swear the scope, S-jacked, or the barrel, swarped. Something." His teammates paused. Half a dozen Navy SEALs, all quiet professionals, glanced toward their youngest member without saying a word. Their leader, Chief Jake Sullivan, didn't. He looked surprised, just tired. Sarah had seen it coming. For the past hour, she'd been observing Rodriguez through a stolen side glance as she replaced targets. His stance was tight, anxious, breathing erratic. His trigger pull had all the finesse of a panic alarm. She could have stayed quiet. She almost did, but her father's voice surfaced, slow, stern, unshakable. A craftsman never blames his tools. Master yourself first, then the weapon. She turned before she could stop herself. "The rifle is not the problem," she said. Silence. Rodriguez blinked. So did the others. They all stared at the girl standing 50 feet behind the line, arms crossed, sun cutting sharp shadows across her face. "You re-pulling your shots left," she added, softer this time, "because you re-flinching before the break. It should ended there. A correction, offered too bluntly, but it didn't. T. Jake Sullivan stepped forward. "You think you can do better?" That's when her heartbeat changed. Slow, heavy thuds now, like boots marching across a hardwood floor. Like the sound she imagined right before everything shifted for good. She didn't answer right away. Just looked at the rifle lying in the dirt. She hadn't touched a military weapon in years. Not since her father's accident. Not since the Sunday session stopped and silence settled in like a thick fog. But she could still feel the muscle memory under her skin. Still hear her father behind her. "Breathe. Through your shot. Watch your heart rate, Dawn." To fight the rifle, guide it. So she nodded, once, calm, careful, controlled. Jake didn't. Smile. He just picked up the rifle, checked the chamber, and held it out like an offering. "Rodriguez has been missing that target all morning. You hit it. I lull by lunch for the team. You miss. And you explain to my CO why a college kid is firing SEAL weapons on a live range." She stepped forward, cradled the weapon, and inhaled slow. The rifle was heavier than her father. Remington longer too, scope magnification dialed far beyond anything she was used to, but the feel was familiar. The way the bolt moved, the subtle give in the trigger. This was no stranger. This was an old dialect spoken fluently after years of silence. Behind her, someone scoffed. She replaced his paper. "Targets, Chief. You really think I got?" Jake raised a hand. Let her shoot. Sarah lay prone, ground cool beneath her belly. The scope adjusted in seconds. She could feel the wind now, low and steady, maybe 5 to 7 knots, left to right. The 500-yard target shimmered slightly. In the heat, the sight picture was clear. She didn't fire, not yet. Instead, she looked up. "Before I shoot, mind if I show you what Rodriguez was doing wrong?" That caught them off guard. Rodriguez opened his mouth to protest, but Jake silenced him again. Go ahead. She slid into the same firing position Rodriguez had used, exaggerating the flaws. Left elbow collapsed inward. Tension in the shoulders. Tight grip, cheek weld sloppy. He loading too much weight onto his support arm. It throws off the natural point of aim, and he holding his breath too long. That spikes adrenaline and tension. She shifted, rebuilt the stance. You want bone support, relaxed grip. Hold your breath only at the natural pause, between exhale and inhale. Silence behind her. Then she settled in for real. The world shrank. The chatter of waves against the cliffs faded. A breath slowed, muscles quieted. The crosshairs drifted slightly with each heartbeat, a rhythm she knew how to time. The moment stretched, thin as glass. Then, the trigger broke. The shot cracked through the morning air. A distant puff of dust bloomed in the exact center of the target. But Sarah wasn't done. She chambered a second round, then a third. Each shot clean. Each impact tight. When she finally rose and looked back, even Rodriguez was staring at the target with wide, disbelieving eyes. 2-inch group, dead center. Jake muttered, lowering the spotting scope. That's better than what we shot this morning. Nobody spoke. The rifle felt light in her hands now, like it had given something back. Rodriguez tried to laugh it off. Must have been luck. You done to just walk in and it wasn't. To luck, said the older SEAL with gray streaks at his temples. I know that name Martinez. Her dad was at Scout Sniper School, right? Sarah looked up sharply. You knew my father? Everyone knew Gunny Martinez, he said. Turned half the Marine Sniper Corps into machines before his injury. If you re his daughter. Maybe this makes more sense. The mood changed. Rodriguez folded his arms, quieter now. Jake studied Sarah again, this time with something sharper than curiosity, respect, maybe, or suspicion, like he was running a new set of calculations behind his eyes. Where do you learn to shoot like that? My dad, she said. Since I was 12, weekends, rain or shine. You ever think about competing? No, just paying for school. The older SEAL stepped forward. You were not just a decent shooter, Martinez. That was expert level. Performance under pressure. Most people choke. Sarah looked down, unsure how to respond. In her world, shooting well wasn't something you bragged about. It was just expected, quiet, private, like a heartbeat. That is when the black sedan pulled up. Uniformed driver, passengers stepping out in dress blues. A man with command posture and a stare sharp enough to cut steel. Commander Harrison, Jake said under his breath. Our CO. And just like that, the world shifted again. Sarah was still holding the rifle. And now the Navy was watching. Was this the moment everything unraveled? Or the moment it all began? Sarah tightened her grip on the rifle as Commander Harrison crossed the gravel with calm authority. His uniform was crisp, the gold insignia on his collar catching the sunlight. The other SEALs snapped to a looser version of attention, informal but unmistakably deferential. This man wasn't here for small talk. Chief Sullivan, the commander said, eyes already scanning the range. Status? Jake stepped forward. Training. Going well, sir. We had some unexpected assistance this morning. Sarah wanted to disappear. She wasn't. She's supposed to be holding a SEAL's rifle. She wasn't. She's supposed to be anywhere near a briefing involving high-ranking officers, and yet there she stood. College kid, part-time employee. With dirt on her knees and powder on her palms, Commander Harrison's Zay's found her. He took in the cap. The rain shirt, the rifle, his expression didn't change. But the silence that followed stretched long and tight. This is Sarah Martinez. Jake continued. Her father is Gunnery Sergeant Miguel Martinez, retired. She offered some instruction to one of our shooters and demonstrated a marksmanship standard that exceeded expectations. Exceeded expectations? The commander raised an eyebrow. How so? Jake turned, gesturing toward the scope. 3-shot group at 500 yards. 2-inch spread. Match-grade conditions. Under observation, the commander stepped toward the spotting scope, bent down, and studied the target through the lens. When he straightened, he looked at Sarah again. Longer this time. You shoot like that often? I shoot with my father weekends. He taught me. Recreationally? He asked, as though tasting the word. It clearly didn't. To sit right. Sarah nodded, suddenly aware of how small her voice sounded in the open air. Yes, sir. I am in nursing school. This is just a job to help pay tuition. The commander didn't. He smiled, but something softened at the edges of his expression. He turned to Jake. Chief, I assume the weapon was handled safely? Yes, sir. Chamber was checked. Safety observed. She knows what she's doing. Harrison. I swept back to her. Miss Martinez? I done believe in accidents. If you repulling groups like that, under pressure, with an unfamiliar rifle. There, that's more here than just a weekend hobby. Has your father ever mentioned military competitions, training contracts, civilian instruction, programs? No, sir. Shame, because that level of ability, it doesn't show up in most of the shooters we train, let alone someone working part-time at a public range. Sarah felt her cheeks flush. The praise unsettled her, not because it wasn't appreciated, but because it felt like someone was pulling back the curtain on a life she never dared imagine for herself. Sir, Jake interjected gently, do you like to request permission for Miss Martinez to observe some of our training blocks? Technical breakdowns could benefit some of the less experienced shooters. The commander looked between them again, then nodded once, unofficially. Yes. Coordinate with her supervisor. And Miss Martinez? Yes, sir. Don't underestimate what you've done here today. He turned and walked off without waiting for a reply. It wasn't until he was halfway back to the sedan that Sarah realized her hands were trembling. Jake approached her quietly. You okay? She nodded, though her voice caught in her throat. That was a lot. He looked at her for a moment, not in the way someone watches a civilian, but the way you size up another operator, measured, curious, maybe even impressed. You held your own, he said. Not many people would have spoken up. Even fewer could back it up. I didn't mean to embarrass him, she whispered, thinking of Rodriguez. Jake glanced over his shoulder. I'll get over it. He saw what he needed to see. The other SEALs had already broken into small groups, whispering and unpacking gear. But every so often, one of them would glance toward her, not with mockery, not even surprise anymore, recognition. Something had shifted. Later, back at the range office, Sarah sat on a bench and stared at her hands. They still smelled faintly of oil and gunpowder. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to do now. Part of her wanted to run, to rewind the morning and pretend none of it had happened. Just finish her shift, go home, and bury herself in pharmacology textbooks. But another part, quieter, stronger, was asking a different question. What if this wasn't a mistake? The next week, Jake called the range directly. Her manager, a heavy-set ex-infantry sergeant who usually treated her like fragile glass, knocked on the break room door with wide eyes. There's a SEAL team asking for you, he said, as if unsure whether to laugh or salute. They want you to observe a training session. She drove to the off-site range the following morning, unsure what she defined. But when she arrived, Jake was already there, waiting with a clipboard and a nod. You not here to impress anyone, he said. You here to observe, speak. Only when asked, don't volunteer unless you confident. She nodded. Nervous all over again. Got it. But he smiled. Unless you see something no one else does. In that case, speak up. The exercise involved wind estimation at extended distances, a session tailored for their newer marksmen. Sarah stood off to the side, hands in her jacket pockets, trying not to look out of place. At first, everything seemed fine. The shooters adjusted for flag movement, corrected for mirage, compensated by instinct. But as the hours stretched on, the shot groups remained erratic. No consistency, no explanation, until she noticed it. A strange flicker of grass beyond the 600-yard line. Subtle, almost imperceptible. But her father had taught her to look beyond the flags, to read terrain, shape, shadows. She walked quietly over to Jake and tapped his shoulder. He leaned in, listening. There, as a micro-valley behind the third berm. It's funneling wind differently. The standard flags won't show it. He raised an eyebrow. You sure? Watch that third target group. See how the shots drift right at exactly the same distance? He turned to his spotter, confirmed it, then called for a hold. Sarah spent the next 10 minutes diagramming the airflow on a whiteboard. She used words her nursing professors would have recognized. Turbulence, laminar flow, disruption zones. The Marines watched, listened, adjusted their wind calls. The groups tightened. Jake stepped back, arms crossed. You just saved us a wasted training day. She blinked. I just observed. Exactly. Later that afternoon, as they packed gear, one of the instructors, a stoic Marine with sandpaper hands, approached her. Martinez. She looked up. You ever consider doing this professionally? She smiled faintly. No, I'm studying to be a nurse. He shrugged. Same thing, in a way. You read people, diagnose problems, offer treatment. She laughed, but it caught in her chest, because for the first time, she wasn't sure nursing was what she was meant to do. Not anymore. She was supposed to help people in hospitals, not on firing lines. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed that night, staring at her half-finished anatomy notes. Her textbook lay open, untouched, highlighter in hand, unmoving, somewhere in the apartment. A kettle whistled, but she didn't to move. The Marine's words kept echoing. You read people, diagnose problems, offer treatment. It was too close, too accurate, too uncomfortable. For months, she'd poured everything into nursing school, every dollar, every weekend shift, every ounce of her father, as quiet encouragement. And yet, in one afternoon at the range, she'd done more good for a group of struggling shooters than she'd ever done with a stethoscope. She didn't to know how to explain that to herself, let alone to him. Her phone buzzed on. The nightstand, a text. Jake Sullivan. Jake, you free next weekend? Got a group of ranger instructors in town. Want you to sit in? Could use your eyes. She stared at the message. It wasn't a job offer, not yet. But it felt like the first ripple from something bigger, like a current she hadn't realized she'd stepped into. What are you doing, Sarah? She asked herself. She typed back. Sarah, I'll be there. Just observing. Jake, that's what you said last time. The Rangers were sharp, older than most of the SEALs she'd met, more guarded, more skeptical. They moved like wolves who seen too much, said too little, and trusted even less. Sarah felt the weight of their eyes when she arrived. No uniforms, no titles, just a young woman in a windbreaker, carrying a small notebook and a quiet purpose. Jake met her at the line, handing her a laminated schedule. Today, estrals are speed to precision. Transitions, fast target acquisition, long-distance finish. She scanned the outline, then the setup. Close quarters steel plates, followed by a 700-yard shot under time pressure. Who's running it? Staff Sergeant Logan, 20 years in. He doesn't to know you, Sarah nodded, watching as Logan barked orders to his team. Every man on the line moved with practiced intensity. But within minutes, the patterns emerged, fast shots clipping. Steal at close range, followed by rushed long-distance misses. She could see it in their footwork, in their breathing, in how they dropped their shoulders instead of resetting their foundation. Each transition bled control. She didn't say anything, not yet. Jake didn't push either. The drill ran again. Same results. Logan paced behind his shooters, muttering corrections, but they weren't hitting, not where it counted. Sarah stepped closer. Logan turned toward her, his jaw tightened. "You got something to say, miss?" Jake started to interject, but Sarah raised a hand. She met Logan's stare. Not challenging, not passive, just honest. They losing their breath during transitions, she said. Not just physically, mentally. Their minds are still processing the close targets while their bodies are moving on to the long shot. They not recalibrating. He raised an eyebrow. And how would you fix that? Reset drills. Build a moment of calm between stages. Teach their bodies to breathe differently between engagements. Give the mind a half beat to re-anchor. Logan studied her. No nod. No approval. Just silence. Then he turned back to his team. Reset the course. Running it her way. The men grumbled, but they adjusted. And when they ran it again, slower, steadier, something clicked. The steel rang less often up close. But the final shot struck center mass. Precision returned. Logan didn't say thank you. He didn't. Teeny to later, he found her by the range card. "You military?" "No, sir." "You teach?" "Not officially." He handed her a piece of brass. CASING. Something small, pressed with numbers. Use that when you coach shooters. It helps them feel the difference when their breathing shifts under stress. She accepted it without a word. He walked off. She turned the casing in her fingers. It weighed almost nothing, but it felt heavy. 2 weeks later, Rebecca Chun called. Sarah had never heard the name before. A former Army officer turned private contractor. She spoke with clipped efficiency and didn't waste time on flattery. "I've heard your name from 3 units in the last month," Rebecca said. "SEALs, Rangers, even some recon guys in the Northeast." Sarah blinked, caught off guard. "I haven't done anything official. That is exactly why I'm calling." Rebecca offered her a meeting, nothing formal, just a conversation. Sarah almost said no, but the word wouldn't come. The office was unassuming. Wood paneling, maps on the wall, a conference table with dings in the corners. Rebecca wore jeans and a field jacket. No rank, no ceremony, just purpose. She asked questions. Sarah answered about her father, her shooting history, her instincts, her education. Then Rebecca leaned back in her chair. "You not here because you shoot well," she said. "You here because you understand why people shoot poorly." Sarah tilted her head. That's not the same thing?" "No," Rebecca said. "Most instructors teach from muscle memory. You teach from pattern recognition. That's rarer than you think." She paused. Rebuilding a new division, precision analysis, teaching shooters not just what to do, but what not to do, based on their own physiology and behavior. Sarah sat very still. Rebecca continued. "We want someone like you, someone who thinks in mechanics and breath, someone who doesn't to lecture, but listens to what a shooter is saying." She slid a folder across the table. "If you interested. We train FBI teams, SWAT, SOCOM, even foreign partners. We allow work around your class schedule. You finish your degree, but you also build this." Sarah opened the folder, pay structure, travel, breakdown, equipment stipends. It felt surreal. I don't have the background." Rebecca gave a small smile. "That is why you valuable." There was no hard sell. No manipulation. Just the space to decide. Sarah closed the folder. She already knew. She didn't tell her father right away. Not because she was hiding, but because she wasn't sure how to explain it without making it sound like betrayal of the life they mapped out together. But when she finally did, on a quiet Sunday evening, he didn't. To react the way she feared. He just nodded. "You've got my blessing," he said. "But more important, they got the skills. So don't waste either." That night, she pulled out every notebook, every old wind chart, every journal entry from range weekends. She read until her eyes burned, and when she slept, she dreamed of crosshairs, of wind, of breath. She wasn't running from nursing. She was stepping into something she hadn't even realized she'd been training for her whole life. And this time, she wasn't just watching. She was taking the shot. Why did they all look at her like she didn't belong? Sarah stood alone beneath the canopy, lesson plan in hand, a borrowed contractor badge clipped to her car. The sun beat down on the Virginia training facility, painting sweat onto the backs of her hands before she'd even opened her mouth. In front of her, 2 rows of shooters, mixed military and law enforcement. Some had combat tours tattooed into their posture. Others wore the silent exhaustion of officers who'd stood at too many crime scenes. Every single one of them was watching her with that quiet, guarded doubt. This was her first official course. A week-long advanced marksmanship block, paid, credentialed, scheduled. Rebecca Chun had reviewed her curriculum twice and greenlit everything. Sarah had gear. She had notes. She had all the right intentions. But she didn't have their trust. Not yet. She cleared her throat. "We're going to focus on positional stability today. Your rifle can only do its job if your body stops trying to fight it." A few arms folded across chest plates. A man. In the back, square jaw, navy patch, leaned toward the guy beside him and whispered something that earned a quiet snort. Sarah saw it all, but she didn't flinch. She opened the crate beside her and pulled out a simple foam model, a human silhouette with a rod through the core. "This is your spine," she said, tapping it with a stick. "Your rifle doesn't care how tough you are. It only cares about physics. If your platform isn't aligned, it will shift, slightly, repeatedly, enough to miss by inches at 800 yards. No one moved. She continued anyway. And those inches? They're everything on a hostage shot, on a moving suspect, on a second-story window from a mile out. You can't buy your way past it. You can't muscle through it. You've got to build your base from bones, not bravado." Someone in the front row chuckled. She caught his name on the roster later. Sergeant Wilkes, LAPD SWAT. He raised his hand. "No offense, but I've been doing this 15 years. What are you going to show me that my department didn't already cover?" Sarah didn't raise her voice. She didn't push back. Instead, she just said, "Step forward." He blinked. "What?" "Come here. Let's see your prone position." He hesitated, then, reluctantly, complied. She watched as he settled behind the rifle on the shooting mat. Textbook form, elbows tight, shoulders rolled forward. Cheek weld solid. To anyone else, he looked perfect. Sarah crouched beside him. "Your build, you've got a longer torso than average, and your elbow's half an inch inside your center line. That's going to drag your shot left when your pulse spikes." He frowned. It hasn't been a problem. She didn't argue. She just gestured to the range. "Take the shot." He did. The steel plate chimed. Low left, about 2 inches off. A few heads turned. She reached out and tapped his shoulder gently. "Now adjust. Bring the elbow out just a hair and shift your support hand back. Let the bipod carry the weight." He obeyed. The next shot rang center mass. He stared at the target, then at her. Sarah didn't smile. "You're not broken. You're just not optimized." By the end of day 2, something had changed. The questions started coming, cautiously at first. Then with momentum, one officer asked about wind mirage techniques. Another wanted help with variable scope zeroing. They'd stopped testing her. Now, they were listening, because she wasn't teaching them how to shoot like her. She was teaching them how to shoot like themselves. Better, That evening, the Marine who'd been coldest on day one, the Marine who'd been coldest on day one, approached her outside the chow tent. Tall, gray-bearded, slow-moving, like a man who'd carried too much in too many countries. "I need to say something," he said. Sarah turned. "Okay," I judged. "You too fast. Figured you were just another smart kid with clean boots and good aim. And now?" He shrugged. "You've got more clarity than half the instructors I've had. You see things others miss. That's rare." Sarah didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. The silence held more weight anyway. That night, in her hotel room, she unzipped her bag and pulled out a folded photo. Her and her dad at the local range, both grinning, sun behind them, his old Marine Corps hoodie stained with oil. She remembered what he'd said after the first time she'd beat him on paper. "If you ever end up teaching this stuff, remember, it's not about showing off. It's about seeing clearly." She hadn't understood that then. Now she did. The final day of training was high-angle shooting, a mock-up of an urban overwatch position with wind gusts, stairwells, and time pressure. Most of the students had improved by then, but there was one sequence, a fast ladder climb to a 30-degree angle shot, that gave everyone trouble. Everyone. Sarah watched, frowning. Shooter after shooter missed low, not left, not right. Always low. She scanned the structure. Then it hit her. The rubber ladder mats weren't anchored. They were compressing under weight. By the time the shooter reached the platform, their body had absorbed 2 inches of elevation loss. Enough to throw the angle off by degrees. She stepped up, flagged. Jake, who was observing that day, tell them to take the shot from a standing bipod, not prone. The angle's fooling their perception. He called it out. The next shooter hit dead center. By the time the exercise ended, half the instructors were recalibrating their own SOPs. Jake approached her as the sun dropped low. "You're not just teaching shooters anymore," he said. Sarah looked at him. "You're teaching instructors." Later, Rebecca called again. "I want to show you something." It was a new site, a mountain facility, under construction. Small classrooms, wind towers, mobile ranges. She handed Sarah a manila folder. "Curriculum design. Yours. Not for this year. For next." Sarah opened it. Her own lesson name stared back at her. Microcalibration. Breath transitions, shooter diagnostics. "What is this?" She whispered. "Your program," Rebecca said. "We want to build an entire lane around your methods. You won't just teach, you'll train trainers." Sarah felt her breath catch. "I'm still in school." "We'll work around that," Rebecca replied. "But this path, it's open, if you want it." Sarah walked outside, wind catching her hair, and stared at the range below. She thought of hospitals, of trauma care, of emergency rooms, of the quiet kind of heroism that doesn't need bullets. She still respected that world. But this one, this space where teaching could mean survival for others, it called to a different part of her. Not louder, just deeper. Why did the highest performers resist change the most? Sarah stood in a conference room surrounded by men who had commanded sniper schools, written doctrine, and fought in wars she'd only read about. A dozen gray uniforms, a few decorated civilians, a handful of contractors. They were here to review her proposed curriculum, the same one Rebecca had asked her to build. None of them smiled. One of the older officers leaned forward, arms crossed. "Miss Martinez, we've been teaching long-range engagement this way since Desert Storm. Your outline." He tapped a packet in front of him. "Rewrites nearly a third of our methodology." Sarah met his gaze steady. "Sir, I'm not saying the old methods are wrong. I'm saying they're not universally optimal." Another voice cut in, a younger colonel, lean and sharp-eyed. "You're basing this on what? A few years of civilian observation?" Sarah didn't flinch. "I'm basing this on thousands of observed shooters. Not theory. Behavior, reaction, correction. A silence passed. Thick, tense." She thought of her father, sitting across from her in the living room, when she told him. About this meeting, they're not going to like you shaking the system. I'm not trying to shake it, she'd said. You are, and that's okay. Just know the difference between being disruptive and being deliberate. Now, in this room, surrounded by legacy, she breathed deep. Deliberate. There's a measurable decline in performance, she said softly. When shooters are forced into standard positions that contradict their physiology, we have the biometric. Data now. Shoulder width, arm length, spine tilt. The tools to tailor form instead of forcing it. One of the civilians leaned back. You're talking about individualized marksmanship. Yes, that's not scalable. It is if you teach the instructors to see differently, Sarah said. This isn't about changing doctrine. It's about changing eyes. Silence again. Rebecca sat quietly at the end of the table. Offering nothing, she'd warned Sarah. I'm not here to protect you. You're not pitching a theory. You're defending a truth. That means standing alone if you have to. Sarah swallowed hard. I'm not trying to erase tradition, she said. But tradition without adaptation becomes ritual. I respect what this room has built, but I'm asking for a lane, not to replace, but to expand for the shooters who don't fit the mold, for the instructors who are willing to adjust. No one moved. Then, from the back, an older Marine colonel with a silver star on his chest cleared his throat. I've seen her teach, he said, and I've seen men who couldn't hold a grouping at 800 yards tighten their shots, because she saw something none of us did. She's not here to burn our books. She's here to write the next chapter. The tension eased, not completely, but enough. Rebecca stood. We'll proceed with the pilot course, voluntary enrollment. We'll let results speak. That night, Sarah walked the range alone under the cold stars, empty brass crunching beneath her boots. She didn't feel victorious, just steady. She wasn't fighting for approval. She was fighting for clarity. The first adaptive shooter course launched 6 weeks later. Enrollment was optional. Most of the students were outsiders, younger instructors, curious operators, law enforcement precision shooters willing to unlearn. The room buzzed with uncertainty. Sarah opened the course not with drills, but with silence. A projector showed a single sentence. What if the way you've always done it isn't the only way? Then she told them about Rodriguez, about the day a frustrated SEAL blamed his rifle, about the moment she spoke up and changed everything, not with ego, with observation. One shooter, a quiet Army marksman named Wallace, raised his hand. So this isn't the fundamentals course? Sarah shook her head. It's a recalibration course. You already know how to shoot. I'm here to help you notice what's holding you back. They leaned in after that. She showed them micro drills for breath, trigger psychology, recoil recovery. Based on body geometry, she taught in patterns, not prescriptions. If something worked for one student, she showed them why and how to apply that insight to someone else. By day 3, they were redesigning their own range habits. One officer approached her after class. You don't teach like anyone else. Sarah nodded. I'm not anyone else, but not everyone approved. Word spread. Whispers in traditional circles. A few instructors from other programs began pushing back. Who trained her? She's not even prior service. She's turning marksmanship into therapy. Rebecca shielded her where she could, but not always. This is what progress looks like, she told Sarah. Friction, resistance. You don't fix legacy with comfort. Still, the doubt got in sometimes. Late at night, Sarah sat in the office alone, going over after-action reports. One note read, unconventional, but impactful. Martinez sees things instructors with 20 years miss. Another, more curt. Competent, but lacks field experience. Risk of over-theorizing real-world applications. She read it twice. Her chest tightened, but she didn't tear it up. She filed it with the others. You don't become a better shooter by ignoring the misses. A month later, she was invited to a unit demo. No classroom, no theory, just one test. A competition between instructors. She was the only woman, the youngest and the only one who had never worn a uniform. 5 rounds, wind at 900 yards. Target size. Headshot only, the range officer barked. Sarah took her position last. She didn't try to outshoot them. She tried to outread them. While others fired early, she waited. Noticed the shifting crosswind. As it touched the grass line, the soft rise in heat shimmered just beyond the 800 marker. The kind of atmospheric language no textbook teaches. 5 shots, 4 dead center, 1/2 an inch low. She took second place. The man who won? A seasoned instructor from Quantico. He walked up to her after the scores were posted. "You know," he said, "most of us expected you to fold." Sarah smiled gently. "I was expecting the same." He chuckled, shook her hand. "Glad you didn't." That night, Sarah called her dad. He didn't say much. He never did. Just, "You keeping your sight picture steady?" She smiled into the receiver. "Yeah, even through the kick." He paused. "Good," he said. "That means you're learning." What happens when theory is tested under real pressure, not just paper and steel? Sarah stood at the edge of the simulated village, headset clipped tight, vest heavy on her shoulders, and the distant sound of thunder rolling over the hills. Except it wasn't weather. It was controlled detonations, the kind used to simulate real-world combat zones. This wasn't a classroom anymore. It was a joint operation training week at Fort Dunn. Military, federal agencies, select contractors. The stakes weren't bullets, they were decisions. Teams had been given time-sensitive objectives, unknown. Wind shifts, limited resources, and one rule: simulate failure as if lives depend on it. Because someday, Sarah wasn't there to participate. She was there to observe. Evaluate, advise, at least. That's how it started. She walked the perimeter of the range, clipboard in hand, tracking each sniper pair. How they moved, how they adjusted optics, how they accounted for stress. The shooters wore body cams, but Sarah relied more on instinct, her gut tuned to details no device could capture. One team, Delta 4, caught her eye early. The shooter was polished. The spotter, newer, young, eager, nervous. They were set to engage from a 2-story window across the village square. But the spotter's wind call was off. Not wildly. Just enough. Sarah crouched behind them. Watched, waited. The call came. Target. Simulated hostage taker. Moving. Partial exposure. The shooter hesitated. The spotter whispered, "Hold 1 mil left." "Send it." Sarah froze. Wrong. She stepped forward. "Cancel shot," she said. The spotter turned. Annoyed. "Ma'am, this is a timed sequence." "Cancel it," she repeated. Calm. Clear. The team lead, monitoring nearby, approached. Is there a problem, Martinez?" She pointed. "They're catching a wind funnel between those 2 structures. His call is off, not by much, but enough to miss high right." The shooter looked unsure. The spotter flushed red. "We've run this position twice in rehearsal." "That was with crosswind," Sarah said. "Today, it's vertical shear. Hot air is pulling your bullet up." Silence. The team lead adjusted his scope, tested the light shimmer. His face changed. "She's right." The shot was recalibrated. Next engagement. Clean hit. On time. Center mass. After the drill, the spotter walked up to Sarah. "I was embarrassed," he admitted. "Thought you were trying to show me up." "I wasn't," she said. "I was trying to save your credibility." He nodded then, quietly. "I'd follow your calls next time." That afternoon, 2 more teams requested her input before their runs. Not because they had to, because they wanted to, but the day wasn't over. Just before dusk, an unexpected twist was dropped into the scenario. Live crisis simulation. 3 teams were pulled into a mock hostage siege with a ticking clock, changing conditions, and real-time audio fed to the Overwatch units. This was no longer about drills. It was about composure. Sarah was called to the command tent. Jake was already there. "Need your eyes," he said. "We've got shooters struggling to reacquire targets under audio stress. Heart rates are spiking, wind shifting." She leaned over the monitors. Rapid breathing, short resets. One sniper's pulse was so high, his scope image was shaking. "They're overfocusing," she said. "Too much auditory clutter. No. Rhythm. They need to time their shots with breath, not command cues." A colonel beside her frowned. "You want us to pull back comms mid-scenario?" "I want you to stagger them. Let the shooters own their moment." He hesitated, then gave the order. The result was immediate. The rhythm shifted. Breath aligned. Shots landed. Afterward, as the sun dropped behind the tree line, one of the FBI overwatch leads approached Sarah outside the tent. "I didn't think breathing drills mattered in the field," he said, "until I saw it play out." She smiled faintly. "It's always the quietest details that save the loudest mistakes." He paused. "You ever think about consulting full-time?" She hesitated. "I'm still finishing school? You should think about it." Then he walked away. Later that night, Jake found her sitting near the empty bleachers. "You changed their outcome today." She looked at him. "I'm not part of their world." "You don't need to be," he replied. "You're changing it anyway." Sarah fell silent. Jake sat beside her. "You know what I thought the first day I saw you? Just a range kid, background noise." She smirked. "I was." He shook his head. "You saw more in 30 seconds than Rodriguez did all morning. You backed it up. And now half this field is quoting your breath control techniques." Sarah exhaled, slow. "I keep waiting for someone to say I don't belong." "They will," Jake said. "But by then, they'll be quoting your lesson plans." That night, she opened a fresh notebook, wrote one sentence. "Tactical calm begins before the shot is ever taken." She didn't know where this was leading. She just knew she was already deep in it and getting better every time she said yes. Why was she suddenly in the room where decisions were made, not just lessons taught? Sarah stood at the head of a long metal table inside a high-security facility in North Carolina. Around her sat a dozen people, not shooters this time, but planners, program directors, commanders, analysts. She wasn't wearing camo or contractor beige, just a clean black polo and the calm, composed look of someone who'd long stopped trying to prove herself. Rebecca had warned her, once they start asking for your input before the trigger's pulled, the pressure changes. You're no longer just correcting errors, you're preventing them. A digital map flickered on the wall, grids, wind charts, urban terrain modeling, a pre-deployment brief for a Tier 1 training evolution overseas. Sarah had been brought in to help adjust pre-mission marksmanship protocols, not to execute, not to advise tactics, just to lend insight. And yet now, a colonel was turning to her. "What's your take?" She hesitated. Every instinct screamed to defer, but she didn't. Not anymore. "There's too much emphasis on mechanical solutions," she said. "Lasers, smart optics, thermal overlays. But the problem isn't the gear. It's what happens to the shooter under cognitive fatigue. You're going to get rush transitions and shallow breathing, especially if the overwatch position shifts mid-op." The colonel frowned. "So, what are you suggesting?" "Build enforced recalibration," she said. "Drills that train them to pause, even if only for 3 seconds, and reset body awareness. Not checklists, body tension releases. Trigger reps don't help if your spine is locked in panic mode." Someone else nodded. "She's not wrong. We've seen shooters freeze even with clear line of sight." Sarah pointed to the terrain rendering. "Set their sim rounds to require an extra second of steady aim. Simulate soft targets in motion with narrow margins. The second they rush, they'll feel it." She finished speaking. No one argued. Rebecca, seated near the door, gave her the tour. Smallest of nods. After the meeting, the colonel approached her. "You think like an operator, but teach like a scientist." "I was studying nursing," Sarah said, "until this found me." "You ever think about what else you could lead?" She didn't answer, but the question stayed with her. The next few months moved fast. Her wind drills became standard in 2 elite sniper courses. Her name was quietly attached to a new module in the FBI's Precision Engagement Protocol. A contractor company reached out, asking her to help design a software-assisted shooter diagnostics tool. She'd gone from watching mistakes to preventing them, to engineering their solutions, but success didn't come without friction. Some instructors, old school, rigid, pushed back. She's not military. She's too young. She didn't earn it the way we did. Sarah heard the whispers, but they didn't land like they used to. She was too busy watching results, like the LAPD SWAT sniper who cut his range miss rate in half after one session with her trigger pressure analysis, or the Marine who called in tears after a deployment, saying her body awareness drills kept him from making a fatal mistake during a rooftop standoff. She wrote everything down, tracked every change, improved every course. But the most defining moment came unexpectedly. At a NATO joint training in Germany, she was invited to observe, not lead. But midway through the week, a Dutch unit began failing a crucial engagement sequence. Their lead instructor had suffered a family emergency and returned home. Sarah stepped forward. "Let me run their final drill." She told the event director, "I've been shadowing all week. I can adapt the course in real time." He stared at her. "You're not even on the roster." "I know," she said. "But if they fail this block, they lose funding. Let me try." 10 minutes later, she stood in front of a squad of fallen soldiers who didn't know her name. "I'm not going to reteach you how to shoot," she said. "I'm going to help you understand why you're missing." She rewrote the drill on the fly, using wind tunnels between buildings, altering target pacing, adjusting elevation. Then she demonstrated not just theory. 3 shots, all center hits, no words, just breath. Movement proof. They followed, and they passed. Later that night, she got a quiet message from one of the NATO liaisons. "Your method saved that unit's certification." She stared at her phone, stunned. Not proud, not boastful, just humbled, because she wasn't doing this for approval anymore. She was doing it because it worked. But with visibility came a question she couldn't ignore. What kind of leader was she becoming? One morning, back home, she sat across from her father. On the porch, he sipped his coffee, silent, as always. She spoke first. "They're asking me to lead courses now, write doctrine, even design programs from scratch." He nodded once. "I'm not sure I'm ready." His eyes didn't blink. "That never stopped you before." She smiled. "I keep thinking someone's going to stand up and say, 'I don't belong.'" "They already did," he said. "You outshot them." She looked down at her hands, steady, calloused, changed. "I don't want to lose why I started." He took a slow breath. "Then don't." That night, Sarah rewrote her mission statement, something she hadn't touched since her early days teaching. "I'm not here to make shooters better. I'm here to make them clearer." She printed it, taped it to the inside of her gear case, because that's who she was now. A challenger, not a replacement, not a fluke, but a quiet shift, a recalibration, one breath, one insight, one shot at a time. What do you leave behind when you were never meant to be part of the story? The wind at the range that morning was quiet, soft, almost reverent, like even the weather understood something was ending. Sarah stood beside a young shooter on the mat. 18, maybe 19, nervous, hands shaking slightly as he adjusted his sling. A new recruit in a new pilot program. He'd been selected for the marksmanship course not because of his experience, but because someone saw potential in the way he observed, the way he listened more than he spoke. Just like she had all those years ago, the other instructors gave him space. He was struggling with a 700-yard shot, compensating too early for wind that hadn't yet arrived. Sarah knelt beside him, watching. "Breathe through it," she said gently. "Don't try to predict everything. Just trust what's in front of you." The young man glanced over, I read your name on the lesson plan. You're that Martinez, right? She smiled softly. I'm a Martinez. The rest is just noise. He returned to position. She stayed beside him. This time, the shot landed. Clean. Not perfect, but true. He sat up, eyes wide with relief. That's the first time I hit that distance. She nodded. Now, let's figure out why, so you can do it again. Later, as the day wrapped, she found herself back in the equipment shed, the same type of space where she once swept brass and taped targets. Her old range jacket still hung on a hook. She hadn't worn it in a long time, but she never took it home either. A voice behind her, gravelly, warm. Jake, I heard you're stepping away for a bit. She nodded. A sabbatical, couple months, maybe longer. He leaned against the doorframe. You earned it. You've been going nonstop for 2 years. More than that, she said. Feels like longer. Jake studied her for a beat. You burned a path through this place, Sarah. Built something real. Changed how we train. She exhaled. It wasn't mine to change. Maybe not. But it is yours now, whether you wanted it or not. She didn't answer right away then. Sometimes I still feel like I'm standing in someone else's uniform. Jake tilted his head. That's what it feels like when you grow into something bigger than you imagined. She drove back to her apartment that evening with the windows down, the wind tugging at her sleeves. Her dad was waiting out front. No words, just a nod. Inside, he poured coffee, the same way he had when she was 12 and couldn't hit paper at 200 yards. He finally broke the silence. So? She looked around the kitchen, the old wind charts still taped to the fridge. Her mother's faded apron still folded neatly in the drawer. Home, I think I did what I came to do, she said quietly. Even if I didn't know I was doing it, he nodded again. You still shooting? I will. Just not for courses, not for lessons, for me. That's enough, she hesitated. Do you think I changed anything? He looked her square in the eye. No, her breath caught. Then he added, you didn't change anything. You made them change. She smiled. For the first time in months, it reached her eyes. Weeks passed. Her name faded from rosters, but not from doctrine. The wind diagrams she'd designed were reprinted for NATO standardization. Her breathing techniques were recorded and translated into 3 languages. FBI trainers referenced her in lectures. Civilian programs adapted her framework. And back at the range, a quiet space carved by her fingerprints, a new instructor took her place. Not a replacement, an echo, a reminder. On a warm afternoon in spring, Sarah returned, unannounced. Just to walk the gravel path, she passed the 500-yard berm where she'd first spoken up. Paused, listened. The same soft ocean wind pressed against her face. She could almost hear it. If you think you can do better. The rifle she once held wasn't there, but the silence was, full of memory, full of weight. She turned to leave. Behind her, another shot rang out. Crisp, steady, centered. She smiled. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts, and when it does, the world listens, even if it doesn't realize it at first. Because real precision doesn't come from the rifle or the rank or the resume. It comes from patience, from courage, from seeing clearly when others don't, and stepping forward anyway.